Good morning, Anthony. Good morning, Stella. Good morning, Maria. God bless all three of you. You can see by the fact that in the background little rainbows are going around that it's it is a live broadcast today. Good morning, Andrew. It's nice and sunny here. In fact, it's an absolutely beautiful day. When I got up this morning, the moon was shining really brightly down the passage behind the chapel, lighting everything up in that wonderful way. Normally, of course, last night would have been punctuated by huge bangs and crashes and lots of fireworks. Here, of course, even if it was banging and crashing and all the rest of it, I wouldn't have heard it because they're too far away. I did hear one firework, and when I looked over towards Shrewsbury, I saw one rocket going off. But I suspect that probably everybody had a much quieter day than normal, and the annual blasphemy of burning Roman Catholics didn't take place. Yes, I wonder why you were calling me Dather, Gary. God bless you. Good morning to Phoebe. Good evening, Tracy. Butterflies and caterpillars. No chrysalids. Good morning, Judith. Good morning, Father Alexander. Your prayers. Good morning, Vicky. Good morning, Father. Rowan Williams he is not the previous Archbishop of Canterbury. He is an Ethiopian, British, but Ethiopian Orthodox deacon. Very nice. I hope Stella's driving to give a gift to her brother-in-law. God bless him as well. Good morning, Marlena. Good morning, Beverly. Yep, it is live. Yes, you're watching live. Okay, yesterday I mentioned a song and said that the women would have felt much like the words within the song. The song itself is by Skeeter Davis, and it's called "The End of the World." It's where the person who she loves goes away. I remember it was recorded and played at a 17-year-old lad's funeral, who I had taught. I was, in fact, expecting to teach. I won't say anything more about him. He was a lovely lad, and was killed in a car accident very suddenly. And his mother had this playing at his funeral. It was a Church of England funeral that I'd been asked to preach at. Very, very moving. You saw her world and the world of her children and his father come crashing down around them. Very, very horrible. It was a very moving, terrible loss. He died about this time of the year. Anyway, there we go. And it describes very well. It's not sung in such a way that describes the emotions. The word's one thing. The way it's sung is something quite different. I think Skeeter Davis did a very good job of that. She sings very beautifully, but not the right way for that. About how can my heart keep on beating, she says. How can the sun keep on shining? How can the waves still keep on coming in? And I know that feeling when something terrible has happened. You look out and somehow it's all just the same. I remember driving to a funeral and just looking at the people going about their ordinary shopping and thinking, don't they know the world has just ended? But it hadn't. It carried on going. I looked to see how the Carpenters sang it as well, Maria. Thank you. Borida, Andrew. Good morning, Ian. Misty in Cumbria. And Tracy talking to a Scottish friend in Arago, watching his landscape driving in England, fog then and bright sun. Yeah, there's no fog here. It's a slight haze. It's beautiful. It looks like it should be August, except that it's November. It should be ghastly, but it isn't. Right, here we go. Mark chapter 16, verses 6 to 8 is what we're going to be doing today. Foggy in the East Midlands. No aeroplanes landing there. The women are alarmed. story so far. They've arrived at the tomb, and they've gone in, and they saw a young man clothed in a white robe sitting on the right-hand side, and they are alarmed. Good morning, Petrula. We can understand why they're alarmed when we understand what else is going on. Let's carry on reading. Verse 6. But he, the young man, said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him, as he said to you." So they went out quickly and fled from the tomb, for they trembled and were amazed, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. There's one word in there that sums up the entirety of our faith, which we'll come to. It's the very center, very middle, very everything of Christianity. And we shall look at that carefully when the time comes. Good morning, Deacon Ilya. God bless you. So the angel is an angel. Maybe what he does is by saying, "Do not be afraid, do not be frightened, shocked, distressed," this is possibly another miracle. He calms them down enough for them to be able to hear and see what they need to hear and see. And then he does something really interesting and also important. You remember the way that there were 3 betrayals. There's the betrayal by Judas, betrayal by Peter, and the betrayal by the Jewish authorities and Pilate working together, where they, in each case, says they handed him over. They betrayed. They handed him over to somebody else. Peter, by betraying, denies Christ. Judas hands him over to the soldiers, and the Jews and the Jewish authorities. And I think it's important to say Jewish authorities rather than Jews. It wasn't all the Jews. The Jewish authorities hand the Lord over with Pilate, hand him over to be crucified. Here now we get the threefold confirmation. What does the angel say? You seek Jesus. Confirmed. We're after that one, are you? Jesus of Nazareth. Confirmed a second time. Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. Confirmation for the third time. You know, the one you're looking for, that one. Him. Reminds me a little bit of a time a friend of mine who's a Romanian priest in Luton, Father Ioan, who's a unadulteratedly marvelous person. I said to him, do you know Father Liviu? And he said, oh, Father Liviu, who's married with some children. Yes, he said, that one. He said, Father Liviu, who did his degree in a certain place. Said, yes, that's him. He said, Father Liviu always dresses in very bright colors. I said, yes, that's him. Father Liviu, who's about this high. Yes, I said, that's him. No, he said, I don't know him at all. Oh, heavens. But here we are, the other way around. You know, I'm confirming to you the person you are looking for. This Jesus, Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. Okay? Making it quite clear. He wants us to sit in their heads. And then he just says the next sentence is just one word. It's wonderful. ἐγέρθη. He has been raised. Just one word. And with that one word in Greek, you completely, absolutely, totally sum up the entire gospel. Lots of people tell me all sorts of things about Christianity, like, for instance, the center of Christianity is being a good person. No, it ain't. The center of Christianity is about keeping the 10 Commandments. It definitely is not that. The center of Christianity, and so goes on, lots of other things. The center of Christianity is one thing. He has been raised. That is the center of Christianity. Everything hangs and falls on that one word. He has been raised. If the angel didn't say that word, and if that word is not true, there is no Christianity. None at all. It is a form of Judaism, or it is a type of Islam. But it is not something that is by itself. He has been raised. Okay, that is the important thing. ἐγέρθη. He has been raised. The English translations are often incorrect. Like, for instance, here it says, he is risen. That's not what it actually says in Greek. The Greek is passive. He has been raised. Okay? He has been raised. God the Son has been raised by God the Father and God the Holy Spirit and God the Son working together. He is risen. He has been raised. Okay? And that is really important. He has been raised. And we then go and we say, Christ is risen. Christ has been raised from the dead. And of course, if you go to an Easter Paschal service in the Orthodox Church, many, many, many times you say, Christos anesti, Christos vaskresi, Christos enviat, Christ is risen. And if I can remember, I can say it in Welsh as well. So Christos and wir, I think. And in Swahili and various other languages, we use Christos ressuscité en français, and so on. Basically, Christ is risen. And we sing the Paschal Troparion as well. In English, it goes like this. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Oh, I forgot. You have to say it in American as well, because the answer is different. Christ is risen. They will say, truly he is risen. In English, they say, he is risen indeed. Okay? Veramente in risotto. Sì, hermana. Sì, hermana. Antigo fod, Christ. Marvelous. Owen, thank you for doing that. Excellent. You know, Father Johan Herring's true. If you see him, give him my love. Give all of them my love. Give Presbytera Diana my love, and the children as well. They're wonderful. It's a lovely, beautiful family. If you know Father Johan, you know the gospel, because the gospel pours out of him. Okay? Word on the street. Word up. True that. Thank you, Father Alexander. Okay? One cannot help but be delighted by the resurrection. But it's one word. He has been raised. In all of Mark's writing, that's the only part that's really the only part that you cannot live without. You cannot do without and still have Christianity. Okay? It's there. It's important. We have to live with that constantly in our being. Everything else is an incidental in some ways. Everything else, because it all hangs upon that. You know, you can say millions of Jesus prayers, prayers of the heart, but if Christ has not been raised, you're wasting your effort. You can fast in a way that makes the Lord fasting for 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness look like child's play. And do that, it's a complete waste of time. You can love other people with all of your being. And St. Paul says elsewhere, give my body over to be burned. And if you don't have this little idea that he has been raised, actually that is also a waste of your effort. Okay? But with that, everything else falls into place. Christ has been raised. Through the sacraments we are raised, we die and we rise with him. The two things together. A lot of people think Christ died for us. Yes, he did. But he was raised for us also. That's the other part of that. And it's really, really important. He could have been run over by a truck when I lived in Yemen, in Sana'a. They used to execute people by running them over with a truck or a Land Rover. All sorts of other ways they had of killing people. But they could have executed Christ by any different way, murdered him any way they liked. But the important part was that he has been raised. I know the good theological reasons why he's crucified upon the cross. It's to do with the tree of life. Okay? And with Christ being raised, everything else completely changes. And we can explain why maybe at the end of this gospel. We shall have a look. Everything changes. Nothing remains the same at all. Now let's go back to that Easter troparion for a moment. Christ is risen from the dead. Strange says nothing about crucifixion there. Trampling down death by death. Here we have the crucifixion. And upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Okay, that's what we believe about death. Exactly how and what happens immediately after death, that's open to conjecture. Rather like the person said about the child of the parents. We know exactly who the mother is, who the father is open to conjecture. We know that we go and we meet God. We stand before God at death. Exactly what happens after that, that is slightly different. Okay? But with the resurrection of Christ, it is the same. You know, when we are baptized, we die with Christ, we rise with Christ. We put on Christ. As many as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. Alleluia. It's like me putting on a coat. Okay? Whatever happens, the coat is going to happen to whatever's sitting inside it. If, rather strange way of looking at it, if the coat goes into town, I go into town inside the coat. If the coat is run over, I get run over inside the coat. The coat is risen from the dead. I am risen from the dead also. But we put on Christ, and Christ is in charge of all of this. Okay? So we die with him, we rise with him. And then the angel says to the women, he's not here. He's not here. See the place where they laid him. And they look and they can see that the Lord is not there. Well, where is he? We said this the other day. Now he fills all things, as he always does. In the grave for the body, the soul in hell, as God sitting at the right hand of God the Father, filling all things, thyself uncircumscribed, as it says in the troparion. He's not here. See the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter. And that is something really wonderful. Okay, they are sent out. These really are the apostles to the apostles. Mary Magdalene is foremost of the apostles, and it's one of her titles. Mary Magdalene, apostle to the apostles. She is sent by the apostoline to be sent. She's sent by the angel to go tell the apostles. And she is the one who comes to them with the good news. Go tell his disciples and Peter. And Peter, what an act of great kindness and generosity that is, to let Peter know, who has been suffering terribly. Terribly. I said, I'd go with you anywhere, even to death, Lord. And I ran away. I denied you 3 times. I fell by the wayside. The cares of the world overwhelmed me. Go tell the disciples and Peter. And that shows the wonderful, forgiving, kind, generous, loving nature of Christ. Just those words. And Peter. Peter can take heart. Peter is forgiven. Peter can take his stand again at the head of the apostles, the rock on which I will build my church. And Peter. Peter, you no longer need to be bashful. You're forgiven. I will go before you, said the Lord, into Galilee. Go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you into Galilee. Why to Galilee? That is the place of the nations. He will go ahead not just into Galilee, Galilee of the nations, but Galilee throughout the entire world, including to where you are, to where Thekla is, to where Jovan is, to where Andrew is, to where Margaret is, to where Father Alexander is, to where Juan is, to where everybody is. Wherever you are, he will go ahead of you into Galilee, ahead of you. And he'll go ahead of you. He's gone ahead of you already into death and resurrection. He will always go ahead of you. If it is your duty to be martyred, Christ has gone ahead of you. If it is your duty to be a missionary, Christ has gone ahead of you. If it is your duty to teach others, Christ has gone ahead of you into Galilee. If it is your duty to be a priest, Christ has gone ahead of you. He is the great high priest. If it is your duty to be a deacon, Christ has gone ahead of you. He tied a towel around his middle and he washed the feet of the disciples. If it is your duty to fast and pray and agonize over other people, Christ has gone ahead of you. He's gone ahead of you into Galilee. He will meet you there and you will see him. You will see him in Galilee. You, and I'm talking not about the apostles, but me and you. We will see him in our own Galilee. When you go to Galilee, the place where you're due to go, the Lord will meet you there. He will see you there. You will see him there. You'll see his action there. You'll see the way that the gospel changes the people around you there. So if you're teaching, or if you're working at the checkout counter, or if you work in recycling, or if you are a lawyer, or if you are the prime minister, or God forbid, if you are the president of the United States of America, and God has put you there, then you will find him there too. What a terrible job that would be after what's going to happen in the next few days. Anyway, okay, so the Lord will meet you in your place of the nations, a place where, notice, it's a place where Galilee of the nations, the place where the faith was not stable. It was an unstable place. You had lots of different religions all fighting and squabbling over themselves there. Judaism, but also the Samaritans, also the Romans, also all sorts of other people, pagans from here, there, and everywhere, meeting in Galilee. And when we put ourselves in that situation, we meet the Lord. You do as he told. Go ahead of me. I will go ahead of you. Rather, I'm saying to the Lord, go ahead of me. The Lord says, I'll go ahead of you, before you, into Galilee. There you will see him as he said to you. It's a promise. And then what do the women do? I didn't write it down in Greek. I wish I had done now. Can't remember exactly what it says, but it's beautiful. And it says, having gone out. Sometimes it says, having gone out rapidly, in a hurry. It's an extra word in some copies of the scriptures. Having gone out, they fled from the tomb, trembling and ecstasy. The word is actually ecstasy. Trembling and ecstasy had seized them. They managed to stay calm just long enough to hear the good news. But now they look again at the angel. They look at the tomb. They see that it's empty. They're overwhelmed by this. Trembling and ecstasy overwhelms them, seizes them, and they fled from the tomb, running as fast as their legs could carry them. They run. In a sense, they run from death, as we all do now that we have the resurrection. They run, flying from it, from this place of death, which has now come the place of life. You know, we have to keep reminding ourselves that none of this was expected. They weren't sitting around waiting for the Lord to rise from the dead. They'd gone there in order to anoint his dead body, terrified anyways, just getting light. And what they see fills them with amazement, trembling, shock, their fear, they're distressed, and now they're shivering like mad and beside themselves. That's what ecstasy means. Ecstatic. Ek, outside, stasis, standing outside themselves. They're not themselves, they're ecstatic. They are amazed, ecstatic, and they're running. They flee from the tomb. And they said nothing to anyone. Well, the fathers say they said nothing to the angels. And they said nothing to any passers-by. They're terrified. Phobos, with ecstasy, with tremulo, and with fear, they run. Reminds me a bit of when the priest comes out with the sacrament. It says, with fear and with love, draw near. And fear is a perfectly decent thing to have in this situation here. When you meet with God, you're not meeting with somebody ordinary. They love the Lord, these women. They love him completely. But until that moment, they don't quite understand what that really means. That God is the Lord Jesus is God, and has appeared unto them. Let God arise, let his enemies be scattered, that those who hate him flee from before his face. As smoke vanishes, so let them vanish. We know the words well, as they come from the Paschal service. And they say nothing to anyone. They obviously talk to the disciples, the apostles, when they arrive. But they say nothing until then. Okay? And then you have this last little 2 words. Because they were afraid. That's not what it says in Greek. It says, they were afraid, gar, because, for. Now, there has been an awful lot of ink spilled over that last word, gar. Okay? And it's because of this. Normally, the scholars say, you don't finish a sentence with the word gar, for, just like you don't in English. You don't say, I went into the kitchen because. Because what? I went to the house because. Because what? I was frightened because. Because what? They were afraid because. They were afraid for, before, because what? You don't end like that. It doesn't say they said nothing for anybody to anybody because they were afraid, for they were afraid. It says they said nothing to anyone. They were afraid because. We don't really know what. Okay? Yes, thank you very much. ἐφοβοῦντο, ἐφοβοῦντο. Very frightened. They were extremely frightened because, gar, the last words. Okay? Now, there are lots of different things. Number one, it could be just that Mark is just displaying his very poor Greek. That's a perfectly decent thing to say. Mark's Greek is not wonderful. It's rather rustic. It's rusty as well. It's clunky. It doesn't fit well together. And he uses the word gar in other places where you wouldn't necessarily expect it to be used. And he uses it also when he's expressing emotions of other people. And there are various examples throughout the whole thing where he does this. Secondly, it could just be St. Mark's literary style, which is also a nice way of saying that he doesn't write very well. Okay, this is just his way of writing. And he's writing really what he's intending to say. They said nothing to anybody because they were afraid, just like it says in English, even though that's a bad translation. Could be just the way he does it. It could be that the last little bit has been lost. That would make sense if this was a codex. A codex is sort of book like this, like that. Okay, you can see it, a book like that. We've got pages in it, and the last page has got torn off. But almost certainly he didn't write a book like this. He wrote a scroll. And it's unlikely that the last bit of the scroll would be left off, because that would be the bit that almost certainly would be in the middle of the scroll. So that's a bit odd. Okay, so it's possible the ending is lost, possible, but people think that it's not all that likely. And then there's the other one, which I personally prefer, and that is he deliberately leaves you on a cliffhanger. Okay, you can do this, and there are books written in Greek that end on the word gar. And there are books written in English and all sorts of languages that go out of their way to show this is Mark's deliberate ending. He wanted to end there. And you're probably saying to me, hang on a minute, Father. I can see verse 9 and I can see verse 10. And in fact, I can see all the way to verse 20. So what are you talking about? This is the end of Mark. Well, I need to explain that. We think this is the original ending of Mark because if you read from verses 9 through 13, you have to learn much more Greek. If you then read from 14 through to 20, you have to learn even more Greek and different ways of declining Greek verbs as well. And it doesn't feel like Mark. It's rather like if you get a letter from your mother, you can tell it's from your mother just by the way she writes things. If your father's added a paragraph onto the end of it, even though they might have been typing or doing it on the computer, you can say, this is where Dad starts writing. Okay? And exactly the same with this. You can tell by the style that this is not written by the same person who wrote those earlier bits. Could have been, might have been who wrote it much later when he's learned an awful lot more Greek, but I don't think that's likely. So we do have to deal with the fact that it ends on this word because. And that is rather nice, I think, because you want to say, well, what happened next? Okay? We're all going to have lots of delicious pudding today at supper time because what? They ran away frightened, saying nothing to anybody because. And the question is, because what? Well, what happened then? And the answer is this. You happened next. You come next. The people listening to Mark, listening to what he read, look around the room and say, because. They know what happened next. They're part of the story as well. And when they're telling the story to their children and great-grandchildren, those children and grandchildren become what happens after that, cascading right the way down to you and me. And in a way, it's an invitation for us to carry on writing. Okay? So we could have, we carry on writing, and we write obviously Luke wrote the Acts of the Apostles, but you then write the Acts of Antony. You then write the Acts of Judith. You write the Acts of Natalia here, the Acts of Tracy Thekla, the Acts of Karl Ahmed, the Acts of Albertas, the Acts of Andrew, the Acts of Father Alexander, the Acts of Graham, the Acts of Petrula and Maria Helena, the Acts of Stella, the Acts of Spiros, the Acts of Vicky, the Acts of Father Owen, the Acts of Gary, and so it goes on. If not, Acts of Marlena, Acts of Beverly. You get what I'm saying? So it's your invitation to carry on writing the gospel, to finish it off, to say to yourself, okay, I am now part of the gospel. Because you are. You are a Christian. You even bear the name of Christ in who you are. You are the Christian follower. You are the disciple of Christ. it's your job to write the next bit. You write it in your life. You write it from your life. You tell people about your experience of Christ. People look at you and they can see the action of Christ upon you, I hope. And the next part there is for you to do. What happened about the resurrection of Christ in your experience? When your heart opened and the angel looked inside and said, "He has been risen." What happened next? What happened to you? What happened to that empty tomb that was you, that contained the Lord? What happens now as you flee from the tomb, rushing, fear and trembling, amazed? Where do you go? Who do you tell? Full of fear. Okay? You might think that's too grand for you to do that. But there's not a single disciple of Christ who thought that their life was too pathetic to be written about. You know, people like St. Paul would have been quite shocked to discover that St. Luke thought his life was worth writing about. St. Peter would have been quite surprised at Mark to discover that Mark thought that Peter's teaching was so important that he needed to write it down and send it to the next generation. People like all the saints and martyrs all the way down the ages until now. So, well, you know, I just got caught up in it. It was nothing to do with me. My life is not important. And we're saying to ourselves, my goodness, the great saint, the great enlightener of the people of Wales, or great enlightener of the people of Britain, the great enlightener of wherever it might be. Okay? And so the Gospel according to Anthony, the Gospel according to Father Philip, is also important. The Gospel according to Father Philip might be a very, very short one. But the Gospel according to other people might be rich and wonderful and bring other people to faith. Okay? That's the way it needs to be done. We need to find ourselves within that Gospel and find the Gospel within ourselves, the two things together. And that stream of living water is what then pours into all of our life, to our neighbors, to our friends, to our family, to our enemies, to those who know us, to those who don't know us. We too, in the end, need to stretch out our arms in crucifixion and accept the marks of Christ and die with him and rise again with him. Okay? That, I think, might be enough for today. Let's see what people have been saying. Margaret says, may Christ rise in our hearts every day we are given. Amen. Andrew, so should a true Christian overcome fear, the fear and even repugnance of death? Death is not natural to humanity. We're not created for death. Death we're dressed in as we come out of the Garden of Eden through sin. So in fact, life is natural for us, not death. And remember, the Lord is God of the living, not the dead. Okay, not the dead. And we go from life to life. We die early. We take on death early in being baptized. We take on resurrection early in rising out of the baptismal waters and being chrismated. We take on the life of Christ early by receiving communion and the other sacraments. We go from life to life. Death is there. And we have to put up with being dead. Not all of us. One day the Lord will come and that generation will not die. Not then. Not immediately. They will come to be a bit of a judgment. A bit of a shocker, I think, for some. But we go from life to life. And therefore, the actual passage of death, though sometimes unpleasant, and I've seen plenty of deaths to know that the last 30 seconds or so can be pretty hairy. But no, we go from from life through death to life. Good morning, Jovan. Christos Vaskresi. Good morning, Albertus. God bless you. Carl Ahmed says, I think St. Augustine said a certain amount of fear is one thing, needs to be kept in perspective. Like in Hebrews 2, the emphasis slavery to the fear of death, not simply fear of death. Yes. People live their lives. You know, we have in our culture now, it's something caught, I think, from elsewhere, this sort of ridiculous. I've been looking at some pictures of politicians who are desperate to look young. And they do all sorts of stupid things to themselves to make themselves look young. And you see somebody in an old face, but with young hair. Somebody who is old and craggy and should be full of character, and their life painted upon their face and in their hands and everywhere else, and have old people's hands, an old person's face, hopefully a face full of love and energy, with the creases all showing that this person is a lovely person. It's all been flattened out, ironed. The face has been lifted so frequently, they have toenails on their cheeks. It looks horrid. Rips their life away from them. They should rejoice in their age. Be glad. Look back over their lives and say, the best is still to come. I'm 90, and the best is still to come. It's an absurdity, but they're frightened of being dead. They're frightened of being old, even. So they do all sorts of absurd things in order to try and keep themselves looking young and fresh. Just wait till they move. And then that is silly. It's foolish. Thecla, is it fear and then joy they're feeling? We're not told anything about joy. It says they are ecstatic. They're outside their bodies. They have had an experience that they cannot and will never be able to put into words. It's just like when you read Luke's account of Pentecost. He says, they heard something that sounded like a rushing wind. They saw something that reminded them of tongues of fire, flames that appeared and sank into them. He doesn't really know what to say. You cannot describe God. God is God. And whatever you try and do about God, everything you want to say about God has to be contained in that little circle there. And God fills everything. You cannot, therefore, describe God. So I'm not really sure. I don't know what they're saying. We're ecstatic. It was something that blew my mind apart. Thank you, Vicky, for writing the last little bits of the Greek there. That's very helpful. Thromas. Okay. Ecstasis. And I love that little Greek way of saying it. Okay. Okay. To nobody, nothing, they said. In English, that says they told everybody everything. In Greek, that says they didn't tell. You know how it is. You go ask a Greek lady, you say, Father, I didn't do nothing. And so, oh, what did you do then? Tell me all about it. There's nothing what you didn't do. Have the audacity to add to the gospel. You need the audacity to carry adding to the gospel. Oh, these last two sections, we'll come on to that tomorrow. Remember then, it wasn't really the gospel. It didn't have the same sort of thing that we tend to have now. Phoebe, we now tend to call it Lives of the Saints. It all started absolutely spot on here. Still part of the gospel story. How nicely written. Father Alexander, it is similar with the icon of Pentecost. The apostles are in a circle and we are part of the icon. This is our because. Amen. 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 Quite right. Good morning, Christos. God bless you. Luistin Vasquez, Joven says. Angelo, good morning from Texas. God bless you all. God bless you also. Texas. Yes, very good. I hadn't realized how many people lived in Texas. I was looking at something about the American elections, which are from over here. my apologies first, nothing, no business of mine to make any comment about it. But it's like I couldn't make it up. And I was looking at the numbers of people living in different parts of America. I was astounded to see how many people live in Texas, as opposed to Wyoming, where I think there's a donkey, a cat, a mouse, an old lady with a bucket, and that's about it. It took no time at all to count up her vote. By the sounds of things, she voted pretty heavily for Mr. Trump. Here we go. Andrew says, the utter cult of youth outside of Orthodoxy practically. Only the Orthodox love old age. Well, you know, everybody likes the idea of having a long life. Very few people like the idea of being old. But a long life does come with becoming old. And it's one of those things that is really a good idea to get used to the idea of that. That if you want a long life, you have to put up with the idea of being old. And if you're old, it's quite a good idea to revel in it, because the alternative is to make a fool of yourself. And an old fool is not a good thing to be. Okay, good morning from Romania. God bless you. Shine, shine. Let's me think about Alex. Our bodies tell our story. I know someone who just spent £2,500 on hair transplants. I'll try and explain that on the great day of resurrection. It'll be easier to have rabbits tattooed on here. From a distance, they look like hairs. Saturday tomorrow, yes. Sorry, I won't be there tomorrow. Monday will be next time. Texas has voted for Mr. Trump, and California for Mr. Biden. That's very interesting. I don't know what Tracy's found funny, but anyway, I seem to be doing an awful lot of laughing. Only if you're British will you understand Brother Daniel's comment about last the summer wine. Okay, right. Right, okay. I'm going to have to calm myself down. I'm laughing too much. Christos. The next project is going to be the Gospel of John. I did think about doing Luke followed by Acts of the Apostles, which would be rather nice. But any number of people wrote emails to me saying, John. So John it will be. And we'll start that, inshallah, sometime next week. Okay, so God bless you all. Do pray for the Americans. I think they're actually in quite a dangerous situation there. If you look at the maps of where people are voting, it's so polarized, so very difficult. America is too important a place for us to sit around and just stand around and be amazed at what's going on there. Far too important. We need the sort of the balance of America, but wisdom and care and thoughtfulness that they can bring to things, their extraordinary ability to learn, their technology and other things in this world. To bring all of that wonderful scientific learning and other learning and abilities to the rest of the world. And to see the Americans tearing themselves in two like this, it's horrific. It really is appalling. And see people who ought to know better stirring up anger and hatred when at this of all moments in their history, they need to have very, very calm, thoughtful people around them, leading them. How the American election will end is not my business. It affects everybody in this world, either for good or for ill. There must be lots of people looking at the democracy, the idea of democracy in America, and shaking their heads and saying, thank God we don't have that. So it's tough, very tough. And when you have charismatic leaders of one sort or another, doesn't matter. And both these people who are being, or may be elected, may not be elected, have their own positives and negatives. Both of them are charismatic. Both of them, one hopes honestly wants to do the best for the United States of America, and maybe for the rest of the world as well. They need our prayers. They need the prayers of everybody. They need their prayers continuing afterwards. Nobody is an absolute good. Nobody is an absolute bad except for Christ. And whatever is said, people have to carry on living with what's said. And you have to behave in a way that is sensible and helps things to be unsaid later on. So spend today praying for that great and beautiful country. I've only been to America 3 times, and once in New York and upstate New York and New Jersey, which was wonderful, and once on the way to Haiti, and once on the way back from Guatemala, and or maybe more than that in that case, because I went to Miami several times, and in each case I was treated with such kindness and such goodness, such openness, such humility and generosity of spirit by people who had no idea who I was. On one occasion I'd taken off my raso and I was wandering around, and I'd not had a proper bagel. I've eaten bagels in this country, the all-night bagel house in Brick Lane used to be a great haunt of mine when I was a teenager, late teens at university. But a proper American one, I said to this woman this, and she said, "Oh, well, I must make you one for free." She refused all payment for her bagel. It was delicious, you know, it was great. And in New York, when the lady, a freezing cold day, gave me ice cream, so great big ice cream. And I said, I'm only here for the day and I really want the best you've got. She said, "You can have something of everything." She said, "Father, something of everything." I said, "Whatever it costs, I'll pay it." And she said, "You're not paying a penny for this one." And she filled up this enormous great thing with ice cream. It was delicious. And she wouldn't take a cent for it. And the people, I paid for a trip around New York. And the man showing me New York, lovely man, Jewish man, he took my, whatever it was, $25 or something for the trip. And then when everybody else had got off the minibus, he then took me for a private trip around New York and refused all payment just because he said, I'd like you to see my New York." It's a wonderful thing to do. And he had been working. He picked me up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and he finally dropped me off at 8 o'clock in the evening, having driven me around New York all day. Anyway, that's enough of New York. I'd love to go back and have another look at some point. Everybody said I'm not going to like New York, and how wrong they were. It was wonderful. The only thing that I thought was a bit odd was where in New Jersey, particularly, I noticed, was somebody really needs to get a hold of the idea of wiring and put it underneath the ground. So you don't have these incredible cat's cradles of wiring everywhere. Anyway, there we go. There's millions of years worth of work there for somebody. Okey pokey. Oh, Virginia. That sounds like a great idea. Yes, your prayers. God bless you.